Hey, would you step out of your comfort zone to create the best photos of your life? Like way out of your comfort zone. That's exactly what I did when I first went to India. This video is about how stepping out of your comfort zone can help you grow creatively as a photographer. I'm going to share my story here, but I'll also show you how you can push your creative boundaries without even really needing to travel. You see, stepping out of your comfort zone even a little bit can go a really long way in raising your level of photography and your creativity. When I got to India, everything was different. A huge cultural shock. I was so out of my comfort zone. The noise, the pollution, the sheer number of people, everything just kind of hit me at once. Everyone wanted to talk to me, to come to their shop, to just say hello. The intensity of the human interaction was insane. It was chaos. It was overwhelming. In fact, I remember on the very first day of my first trip to India, I locked myself in the hotel room just to take a breather from it all. Here's something that I think is really worth mentioning. When we step out of our comfort zone, most of us don't just do it for the sake of doing it. And then, we hope that sometime, someday, something amazing will come out of it. Usually, it's going to be inevitable that something will come out of it, but that kind of mindset, that's hardly motivational. In the case of India, my motivation to be in this overwhelming, almost alien world was that I'd have endless photographic opportunities. Vibrant colors, diverse cultures, incredible faces. Fascinating things were happening everywhere. If I could survive and adapt, I could tap into all of that. The potential payoff would quite simply be the best photos of my life. So if you are planning to step out of your comfort zone, you need that payoff, that strong motivating factor. Without it, it's much less likely that you'll embrace the discomfort. There are a couple of approaches to stepping out of your comfort zone. One is to gradually do little things that make you uncomfortable. Step by step, you kind of expand your threshold, and as a result, your comfort zone widens. But this requires quite a bit of discipline and a more methodical approach, which isn't really my style. My approach was more like diving into the deep end, going to India. I adapt best when I absolutely have to, and especially when there's a pretty clear potential reward. You don't have to do it my way. A more methodical approach might suit you better. Being thrown into the deep end really set the stage for future travels and photographic adventures. No place shocked me as much as India, got me as much out of my comfort zone as India. So after it, I actually felt relatively comfortable in most of the countries that I visited. Traveling around India did come with some specific discomforts which were beyond just the obvious cultural shock. Yes, it is an intense and often chaotic country, but there were layers of discomfort to deal with. And there were some specific rewards, other than the photos, that came with the discomfort. I learned to ride a motorcycle in India, but navigating the traffic in Indian cities, that's really stepping out of your comfort zone. You regularly face near-death experiences on the road, and that's no exaggeration. I traveled mostly by motorbike, so you can imagine the impact. The upside, the reward? Well, after learning to ride in India, I could handle riding pretty much everywhere in the world. And I did, in many other places. The road awareness I developed in those extreme situations made everything else more manageable. So adapting there was a big thing for me. And there were some unexpected discomforts too, like the absolutely overwhelming hospitality. I had never experienced anything quite like it. People would often invite me in just after meeting me. Moments later, I'd be having tea, sometimes even food in their homes. Just an outpouring of hospitality. If we showed up at a village late at night, a family could just kind of take their child's bed, give it to us, and bundle up all the kids in another bed. It was so heartwarming, but also uncomfortable, because I felt that I was taking something from people who had very little. With time, I realized that this was my perspective. They saw it differently. They saw it as an opportunity to show their hospitality and to accumulate some good karma. And that was a big lesson for me, to see the bigger picture. I had to understand the importance of positive energy circulating all around, or as the Hindus call it, good karma. Well, just a little interruption, some goats getting into my frame. I did see a lot of their footprints by this little river. It seems to me like every time I try to record these videos, it just gets ridiculously windy. So I'm just going to be in the car for the next few gusts of wind. After those experiences in India, I made an effort to be kinder, to give more. And I'm not talking about money necessarily, not giving money, but, you know, caring, spending time, putting in the effort. For a creative person, stepping out of your comfort zone can lead to a powerful creative push. I've never felt as creatively alive as I did in India. It's this energy that inspired me to create the Photographer's Mindset India. It's an educational resource for those who want more than the usual recycled content that the internet is full of. You'll learn through case studies, real life situations, and audios. These are the very lessons that shaped me as a photographer and as a traveler. Time to share them with you. The Photographer's Mindset is launching right now. It is on special, and the links and all the details are in the description. And so back to this feeling of being creatively alive. Sure, it had a lot to do with the endless photographic opportunities and the welcoming nature of people, but a big part of it was that everything familiar felt new. Everything pushed me out of my comfort zone. And this made me notice details, nuances. I'd get excited by the smallest everyday things. And if I'm being completely honest, then I have to say that I very rarely felt comfortable enough to just chill out and take a casual stroll like I would in Australia or maybe parts of South America. This meant that I was always switched on, always aware of my purpose in India. This kept me on my toes creatively. So I was constantly making photos, developing, and growing. I reckon that living this way long term would be very, very stressful, an absolute bloody nightmare. I don't think that I could do it, but short term, for a photographer, it was amazing. There are definitely other countries that can push you right out of your comfort zone. But in India, it was the perfect combination. Because you were in this radically different, almost alien world, yet you felt welcome. You felt the warmth of the people. There are all of those challenges, of course, that I've mentioned, but once you get the hang of things, it's not like there are any real dangers. Very important, though, I should mention that I am speaking from the perspective of a man. For a woman, things are likely to be very different, but I can only speak from my own perspective. Once you adapt, you can take full advantage of the endless photographic opportunity. You can just create and experiment almost without limits. All of this is to say that 1, India is very special for photographers, and 2, if you want to go to another country to get out of your comfort zone, make sure that you feel like you can actually photograph there, like you can be creative. Okay, so let's say that you're not planning a trip to India anytime soon, and maybe you're not even planning to travel. Can you simulate that feeling of being out of your comfort zone, that level of discomfort in your everyday life? Now, of course, you cannot replicate that level of shock, the experiences of India in your daily routine. You can't do that. You usually can't just flip your entire understanding of the world on its head without something radical happening. And if we're talking about everyday life, then having that something radical happen usually isn't a good thing. But you can take the more methodical approach. Or in a way, you can actually jump into the deep end too. One way is to photograph something that you are completely unfamiliar with, or to put yourself into a challenging situation. For example, if you don't normally do this, then start photographing and interacting with strangers. It's not as scary as it seems, but for some, it'll definitely be the equivalent of jumping into the deep end of the pool. Now, in many Western countries, public photography isn't always welcomed, and someone might just tell you to piss off, but that's usually the worst of it, and I'm not suggesting for you to be like Bruce Gilden and go around with a flash and shock everybody with your photography. I'm talking about striking up conversations with strangers and asking for photos. You step out of your comfort zone this way and you build confidence and you get many new creative opportunities. If you haven't done this before, it is incredibly stimulating, and over time, you'll definitely expand what you are comfortable with. And then once you're more comfortable with this kind of stuff, then try a completely different kind of photography. Try pushing your creative boundaries a little bit more. You don't always have to step out of your comfort zone in the full sense, or maybe the literal sense of the word. You can step out of your creative comfort zone. So, for me, when there isn't much happening, when I'm not provided with new visual stimuli, I feel like I have to leave my photographic comfort zone, at least occasionally, and I start shooting subjects that I wouldn't normally choose. I feel that the first time that I did this was during one of my visits to my native Belarus. Do you know what I did? I photographed my friends and family. You see, I had actually become very comfortable with photographing people in the faraway places and foreign cultures. They always seemed much more fascinating and interesting for me photographically. Photographing people I knew, my friends and family members, in a really weird way, this was actually me really getting out of my comfort zone. It was not something that I was used to creatively. In fact, I almost looked down on anything of this sort before, thinking that it wasn't worth photographing. But once I started shooting these, for me, new subjects, it definitely contributed to my growth as a photographer. I learned to see the special, magical moments right under my nose. Here's another example for you. And look, all that I'm talking about, this is just food for thought. I'm sure that you will be able to find things, subjects that resonate with you along your own photographic journey. So anyway, I was traveling through Georgia and Armenia, former republics of the USSR. And while I was there, I didn't always have the kinds of subjects that I love photographing. So didn't always have the amazing characters, the culture. Sometimes I didn't have spectacular landscapes, which is actually kind of rare for those places because they do have a lot of amazing nature. But I still wanted to kind of push my boundaries creatively. So I started photographing Soviet buildings, of which there were many, pretty much everywhere. Some were dilapidated, some still functioning, but in general, it was all visually dull and a little somber. With my background, having been born in the Soviet Union, I kind of despise many things that are related to the USSR. Not everything, but the architecture is something that I do absolutely despise. As a kid, I'd look at these tall grey buildings, the statues, the memorials against the often grey sky, and I'd wonder, what kind of world exists outside of my country? Despite all this, I began to photograph these kinds of buildings many, many years later in Georgia and Armenia, just to see what I could do creatively. Could I channel the negative energy that I felt towards them into something creative? Could I capture the dehumanization that I associated with that architecture, with some of the ideas that came with Soviet Union? Some of the buildings I photographed were left to decay. Others were damaged by conflict. And some were just built in such stark contrast to their beautiful surroundings. All of this was a great representation of the epic failure of humanity, of those Soviet times. And I thought that this was definitely worth exploring through my lens. So I started not only photographing these buildings, but also shooting them with a drone. And eventually, this type of subject matter even became something that I was drawn to. And so as you accumulate these kinds of experiences, That's when growth happens. Bit by bit, India was the huge push that got me out of my comfort zone. It allowed me to see all of the possibilities and made me more willing to step out of my comfort zone in the future. And this was absolutely crucial for my growth as a photographer, as a creative person. Each new challenge and each new step added another layer to my creative journey. Well, nothing after India felt like jumping into the deep end of the pool, at least not in comparison to India. That initial leap was crucial. It showed me the potential that came if you could embrace discomfort. And so, this video, like other videos that'll be coming up in the next few weeks, it's rooted in my experiences in India. Like I said, for me, India was my photographic classroom. It's where I became a photographer. But the lessons that I'm sharing here, I hope that they go beyond India and maybe even beyond photography. Now, at one stage of my photographic journey, of my life, I was faced with a choice. Should I build out my photographic kit, get great gear to be a serious professional photographer, spend a lot of money that way, or travel, head out into the world, gain experiences, all that sort of stuff? I think you might have a pretty good idea of what I chose, but there were quite a few interesting lessons and takeaways from that decision. You can watch a video about all of that here, and there's going to be a new video next week, which, if you're watching this later, might already be available here.